Hello, hello. This is Alex Burkett, and you're listening to the Long Game Podcast. This episode is a part of our Kitchen Side series, where we pull back the curtain and show you the behind-the-scenes conversations, debates, strategies, and brainstorming sessions that we have at our agency, Omniscient. This episode broadly covers what we will call the future of SEO. It was based on a table discussion that I moderated at Spring Conference this year. And our discussion here includes topics like surround sound SEO, the emergence of digital PR and product marketing as SEO inputs, brand mentions, artificial intelligence. We did a redux on how we're currently using AI and how that view has changed since sort of the advent of generative AI technologies. We talked about the fundamental problem, the ever-evolving problem of information retrieval, the value of content creation, and how consumer behavior in search may or may not be changing. We also walked through recent Google SERP problems, a lot of degradation in the quality of SERPs, and as a bonus, we did a little discussion on why your bougie dentist may be scamming you. Without further ado, enjoy this episode of the Long Game Podcast.
No, I know it's not conducive to like relaxing, but every night this week I've had plans, and then every night next week I have plans on top of working. And I'm like, I don't like saying no to things. Like I definitely have FOMO, but I'm like, when am I going to recharge? Like, when am I just going to sit and do nothing? And I wasn't even traveling as much as you all did. So I can't imagine.
Well, but yeah, I think like I need probably a little bit less of that than you, just extrovert, introvert kind of stuff. But
yeah,
I do think like for me, at least, like doing the social stuff is in a way relaxing as long as it's not like too many drinks or like conferences where it's like you're kind of performing. Like when I just hang out with Mark or like a good friend, it's a little bit more like,
yeah, you're not like on
soul soothing. Yeah.
Yeah.
David, what's up?
Not much. After we got back from Mexico, well, I got in like midnight. I went to sleep at like 1. And then it was like a super intense week. And then that Friday, Lisa's classmates had like a triple birthday party thing at a club. And I was like, I don't know if I'm ready for this, but I'll just go. But it was like loud music that it was like R&B. So I enjoyed it. So I was just like, I wasn't even talking to people. I was just dancing. And when I did try to talk to people, I was like, I didn't have the social energy, but I had the physical energy to like I was feeling jittery. I also had a couple drinks. So I could like wiggle and dance, but I couldn't socialize. And then the next day we went to a picnic and I was like trying to socialize. And I was like, okay, that battery's recharging, but took some time.
Yeah, I get that. It's definitely tough. I've been working out again this week too. It's been like getting back into the swing of that. It's been a little difficult, but I'm trying to like, usually what I do is I go back in and I go really hard. Like I go back to where I was before. This week, I'm like, all right, I'm going to go like 60% of the weights that I normally lift. And I'm going to do like slow, really good form and like do 20% less like length of a workout. And that's actually been working pretty well. Turns out like moderation is good. You know, if you don't just fucking kill yourself, like it actually works.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, my ego took a hit because I felt it was more difficult to go up to the weight I was squatting or deadlifting before.
Same.
And I felt the urge to just like, I can put on 5 more pounds or 10 more pounds. I was like, nope, that's a mistake. You're already struggling here. Don't add more.
That's when you get injured and 3-day, 4-day soreness, all of that. I read something recently. It was on Twitter. So like, I don't know if it's true, but I went to the dentist and I had another cavity. And I read something on Twitter where a bunch of PE firms have bought up all these dental groups. And they're like, it's kind of like car repair people, how they say, oh, you need this, you need that. Like apparently that's happening a lot more in dentistry lately. Again, I don't know if it's true. It could be just conspiracy theory type thing.
No, it is.
I was thinking, I'm like, I like brush and floss regularly and it's only been a year. So I'm like, and I had no pain. I'm like,
yeah.
Was this $1,000 thing necessary? I don't know.
No, because I went to dentology a couple weeks ago. They just opened one in my neighborhood, and I'm always skeptical of like healthcare chains, but I was overdue and I just wanted to get it over with. And like, I don't have any cavities, never been told I needed a cavity or needed a filling. And I went to this place and they like, well, there's like 4 places here that maybe we should be like preventative and like blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no, I'm going to get a second opinion. Like I just, it was so out of character for my normal visits. but I was reading about dentology specifically and how they're like VC backed. They opened like a ton across the country. And I think that's probably how they've been thriving, is just like I think they're just
upsell,
maximizing
cross-sell, revenue expansion. Totally.
It's
well,
like,
there's
and
just
it's a lot of
inherent
fear mongering
gatekeeping.
too.
Yeah, people just don't inherently know a lot about cars or teeth or stuff
What
like
am
that.
I going to
So they
say if
just
somebody's
trust.
like, hey, you've got cavities? I'm going to be like, no, let me get a second opinion. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have no idea. Like, you're looking at the scans. You've gone to school for this. I feel like it's a health issue. Like, I'm going to say yes. Like, I'm kind of in a vulnerable position there.
Yeah.
I feel like there's so many experiences like that have been pushing me towards, I can't trust anyone. Like
Yeah.
for dentistry specifically, I had one of my dentists be like, hey, you might have to get surgery or like get this thing. I'm like, how urgent is that actually? Like, am I about to,
Yeah.
I don't know, have crazy pain tomorrow? He's like, I don't know, maybe in the next 3 to 9 months. You never know when it's going to happen. I'm like, fuck that. I don't need this. And then I went to get another opinion. They were also like, oh, that's actually a concern. Also couldn't give me a timeline, but they told me to see an oral surgeon, which I had to pay to see. I saw a surgeon, and this was the only guy who was real with me. He was like, there's no clinical, like, do you feel any pain? I'm like, no. And he said, then don't do anything. I'm like, wait, but everyone else was telling me that this is a concern. And he's like, yeah, but you don't feel any pain. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
And he's just like, let me be real with you. Yes, you could do all that. It's actually quite risky if you did all that surgery that they're telling you to do. If you're not feeling anything, don't worry about it. I'm like, thank goodness. Like, I had to go through all these hoops and meet 3 different dentists and like an oral surgeon to finally get to this truth. And he's like, don't worry about it. And he was an older guy. Maybe he's just like seen the whole thing and knows what the younger guys are trying to do and like get paid or whatever. But I really appreciated just being told not to worry about it versus all these other folks fear mongering.
Yeah. It's an interesting trend. It's like the growth marketification of the world. It's like, I don't know, I'm trying to relate it back to the marketing world. And I feel like we're often the old timers who are like, yeah, you probably don't need to do that if you don't want to. Like, if you're really compelled to go post videos on TikTok, like do it. But, is it really hurting your business by not? And then you've got other people who are like, if you're not doing this, you are getting left behind in the dustbins of time. And it's like, like the AI stuff too. It's like, you have companies that are growing perfectly fine. One of my favorite things actually was at Golden Hour, there was a panel about just CMOs and like what the new world of marketing is and everything. At marketing conferences is it's so hyperbolic. It's like the old way is dead and like here's the new way. And you had this panel and Andrew Davies was on the panel. And the way he spoke, he's just like, yeah, like all the stuff we're doing is working because we're doing it well. So we're doing a lot of old school tactics, but we're like adding a different level of personality and brand flair to it. So it's like, it's demand generation, but it's also brand. And it was just like this clean voice of reason where it's like, yeah, like maybe you're doing okay.
The boring stuff works.
If you do it well. Yeah, I don't know.
I did have a thing around kind of how this whole AI thing has evolved, at least in our industry, that maybe it's worth revisiting, not around like doom and gloom or even talking against doom and gloom, but just like the sobering facts of where it is and even trends we've seen across our clients and their responses to all this stuff. So I don't know if you want to start there, if there's something else you want to start with, Alex.
Yeah, let's tap into that. The ideas that I had, really the top 2 or really 3 were the future of SEO, because one of the conferences that you and I went to, David, was Spring, and I moderated the table on that discussion. And Maiva Cifuentes from Fi and Cat did this like recap of our table, and I thought it was really good. Like just the discussion that we had, it was so much more optimistic and clean and sober, and just like it wasn't filled with like doomerism or hyperbole. It was really just like stating like what works now, what works in the future. So maybe this AI stuff parlays into that. The other topic was this idea of like really what I was talking about with Andrew Davies, saying it's not really like what you do, like what you decide to do kind of defines the impact, where it's like, okay, like what's the best case scenario if we invest in SEO? Like maybe there's a ton of people searching for this and the impact is very high. Maybe there's very few in our ICP who are searching for solutions on Google and it's very low, but that doesn't define how you actually win or how you compete on that channel or that tactic. That's the how. So like the what and the how, I feel like are often now like intertwined in a way where maybe they shouldn't be. And then the last one was content IP, this idea of like, coining terms and frameworks. And I was just kind of like getting a little bit more cynical on the value of that, even though we've done it a couple times. But I think starting with the AI thing is really cool. Just, it's still a hot topic. Maybe you can kind of lead with what you were thinking there.
Yeah, I've been looking at kind of the last year and a half. And I know even on this pod, we were talking about how in the beginning, clients were starting to overhype it. They gave it a lot more credit than it was due. We were starting to get asked, hey, you should be able to do all this stuff for cheap, right? Because you have AI now. And now the pendulum's kind of just swung to the other end where we have clients who are adamantly anti-AI, where they're taking our work and run it through AI, whatever those detectors.
Originality to AI, which are a bunch of...
Which are not reliable.
Say it out loud. Yeah, I was going to say scam, but...
They fear monger.
We should be careful with language, but yeah.
Yes. But one of them put our work through an AI detector and it gave it like a 71 out of 100 score. And we're like, we can assure you this was not written by AI. Like, let us put this through 5 other detectors. And it gave a massive range of like weather scores. And we're like, it's just crazy that they're kind of doing their own diligence on their end to like actively work against whatever might be AI generated, which I think it's valid. Like you don't want your content to sound like everything else or be a duplicate of anything else, especially after kind of the recent algo updates where a lot of these companies that were doing that lazy AI content ended up getting hit really hard by Google. And across our clients, like, guess what? No impacts. I mean, there was one that was working with another company beforehand that was slightly impacted, but nothing on our end, which I think speaks a lot to how we like infuse information gain and make sure it's actually like useful. But that trend is really interesting. And the last point is around the business use cases are really clear, but they're not applicable to many people. Like using AI to generate images, great, but not like, I don't think our work really has to do with generating too many images. Using it to code, that's amazing. But in our world, like we're not doing much code. Like, and so there are these really valuable use cases, but I think in our world, especially with like content and SEO, the use cases are still pretty superficial. And I personally think that there's a lot more to be done here, but there seems to be a barbell of folks who are still continuing to give it a little bit too much credit, but then also people who are just anti, like, I don't want you touching this stuff if you're working with us type of thing. So that sentiment has been top of mind for me. And it's now a different battle for us to fight of explaining or communicating that we're not using AI in the ways that they think versus before it used to be telling them we're not going to use it. So it's kind of a strange situation.
It feels like kind of missing the forest for the trees, or like a logical error that everybody's making. And what I mean by that is like, it actually doesn't matter if the content was produced with AI or with the assistance of AI or with AI in the background or with AI editing it. It's like the wrong question to ask entirely. You're missing the whole point. Like the question is it good?
Yeah.
And if you haven't defined that, then like, why are you worrying about like the methodology by which this piece came to live?
Yeah. It's like, hey, use the screwdriver instead of a drill. Like we want you to use a drill.
Well, was the TV mounted correctly? Then like, it doesn't really matter which tool was used for it. For you, at least, as maybe the consumer of the TV, for the producer, it matters because maybe there's like a cost associated with it. But yeah, there's such a big pendulum. And that's why I think we've railed against all of this noise and like, especially LinkedIn influencer nonsense so much, is because it's just distracting. It's like taking your eye off the ball. Like, is the content good? Is it serving the purpose of your intended audience? Is it getting distributed correctly on SEO or social? Is it landing in their hands, and is it converting? If it's obviously bad, does it matter if it was a human writer or an AI that produced it? I just don't think that's like the question that matters.
Ali just moderated with one of our team members, Taylor, this discussion and workshop on strategic thinking based on the book Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. And I mean, the main takeaway was we could be helping our clients a lot more with like focusing on the objectives and strategy and goals, not these tactics that oftentimes get in the way of being able to implement a strategy that will actually get to your goals. And I think, at least for the folks listening, it may be a case where, hey, rather than thinking too much about the tools that you're using, like, are these actually going to be helping you get to your goals? And I think a lot of these discussions around AI versus not AI, like it continues to miss the mark on, is this going to help us achieve the goals that you set out to achieve? If yes, great. If not, then let's talk about why and if there's a better way.
On maybe a fun level, we've all been early adopters to these tools, and it might be fun to like do a redux on how we actually do use them today. I'm not sure if y'all's usage has changed. Mine definitely has quite a bit after I pumped a bunch of AI content on my personal website and got absolutely slaughtered. I don't use that as a use case anymore. My main one is actually research. I enjoy Perplexity, and I actually have a lot of thoughts on Perplexity if you do want to cover the future of SEO. I talked about it in my newsletter too. But it's basically using Google search results, and it's summarizing a lot of content. It's very accurate. So for me, it's like I used it for podcast guest prep. I was like, hey, tell me about this person. What are they known for? And it gives me a bunch of links and citations that I can go research further. And then I actually used it. I was like, well, what are some maybe contrarian or underrated questions that may provoke like spicy answers, or I can't remember how I phrased it. And it actually gave me some really good stuff. I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. So I guess like that displays my two use cases, which is research and sort of like cursory understanding of maybe an industry or a person or a topic. And then brainstorming and creative ideation, which I'm not as good at. So it might be, it's actually like silly use cases. Like if I was going to throw a party and it was going to be like 80s themed or something like that, and I wanted to come up with a fun name for it, I could say like, give me 20 ideas for puns about like 80s movies for this party I'm throwing. And it'll give me like really cool ideas. So it's just like a way that I don't think as well. And it's very good for things like that.
Yeah, I've definitely used it mostly as like a creative or strategic like sparring partner or like thought partner. I mean, I've even seen it be really helpful. I mean, we're a fully distributed workforce, right? And we're like trying not to have a ton of meetings. And sometimes you just need that backboard or that sounding board to like bounce stuff off of. And no, AI can't be like fully human for that. But as in terms of like starting a project or exploring a new client, like, hey, I'm doing this new SEO campaign or whatever you want to call it. Like, here's the client, familiarize yourself with the website. Like, here's the objective. Here's what I know about the audience. Here's the ultimate goal. And it could go in many directions from there. Like, tell me about 10 like topics I should start to explore, or examine this article and get to know like the tone of voice or how this article is written and edit this piece. Like, there's just a lot of directions in that way. But I think as we've discussed from day one, the inputs really matter. Like the quality of the prompts and the inputs really matter. It can't really generate original thought, obviously. And that's why the writing or taking it, the writing as is just such a bad idea. It's just like regurgitated shit. But as for like bouncing back ideas and giving you different ways of thinking about things, or, you know, extrapolating on things if you're having like a mental block, kind of like what you said, Alex, it's really good for that for me.
For what it's worth, I think a lot of writing is just regurgitated shit. I don't think that's unique to AI.
Everything's a remix.
Yeah, but I think like in that way, like the real alpha is becoming an original thinker, which is a very difficult process of extricating yourself from mimetic desire and like, you know, groupthink. And like, that's a whole fucking thing that we've talked about before with our taste podcast. I think we did a very good job kind of displaying how you build that sense of taste and originality, but that's a whole different conversation.
Yeah.
David, what about you?
I've used it a lot for spreadsheet formulas. Like, I'm able to write pretty long, complex formulas now because of it. And I'll just be like, this value is in this cell, and this value is in this cell, and this and this. Like, I want to do X, Y, Z. Tell me how to do this.
Same.
And it's super helpful. I use it for research, similarly to you both, and one of the favorite things I like to do for preparing for interviews is I will upload content that someone has written. I'll add a link to their LinkedIn profile and like add their bio and be like, this is you. Tell me like, what are things that you would want to geek out about on an interview? Mm-hmm. And it gives me some good starting points of interview questions. The questions tend to be generic, but there were questions that maybe I hadn't even thought about. Mm-hmm. And there are some cases where I have an idea, but I'm not sure what words to use or how to frame it. And so I just mind dump and I'm like, help me clarify my thoughts. And it'll help me clarify the random thoughts and ramblings. The other thing is sending meeting follow-ups emails. So I'll get a transcription of a meeting I had with a prospect. I'll get the transcript. I'll put it into ChatGPT and I'll say, summarize this in less than 10 bullet points. Make sure to hit on these bullet points.
Dang.
And that's it. And I'll spend like 5 minutes cleaning it up. So follow-up emails that used to take like 30 minutes take like 5 minutes now.
That's amazing.
So let me add actually, because we're talking mainly about proactive use cases, but there's a whole set of passive use of AI that we need to honestly give so much credit for. Because most people, it's like you have these extreme opinions for like, AI can't replace writers. And it's like, sure, okay, cool. But like the stuff that's embedded in products is actually fascinating because what we're doing right now is we're speaking on Riverside.
Yeah.
And Riverside basically gives you a transcript. It allows you to edit within the platform. You can create magic clips using AI. You pull the show notes using AI. And like if you actually compartmentalize each step of that process and like used a different tool for that, or did it manually, it would take so much time and effort and cost that we would barely be able to produce the podcast. So like this is a hidden thing. And I think AI's the best state of AI is when it's invisible, actually. And that kind of goes back to the article stuff. It's like, if it invisibly was used to produce a good piece of content, then who cares if it was used? The other thing is like these meeting note takers, amazing, right? Fireflies. Shouts out to Michael Peachy. I'm using Day.ai right now. And David, I'm using it for the same use case. Day is in the early days. It's like Notion meets Fireflies, meets a CRM. It's very cool. But essentially, it'll give you summarized notes of the conversation, recording. It'll cut clips of different sections so you can pull those. You know, imagine you're doing a subject matter expert interview. It can pull those video clips. You can post those to YouTube. That could be pretty interesting. It also gives you follow-up action items, and it writes the follow-up email for you just automatically. So I struggle with that. Like I'm a very bad note taker. I can't take notes and listen, let alone take notes and talk and engage in a conversation. So that part alone, just the fact that it's listening and transcribing and summarizing is great. But then all of those follow-up items where I can like create a page with the contact that I spoke to, like the meetings we've had and the transcripts and the action items, plus the past emails and the summary of those, and then their online like persona as well. And then I can get all this context when I'm doing sales or client calls. And it's everybody uses that term second brain, but this is the first time where I'm like, actually, this does feel like an augmentation of my brain.
The interesting thing that I've found for AI is I know there's these large use cases that are really groundbreaking, and like building a product using only AI to code is really interesting to me. But I think for the average person, it just helps you do all the things you don't like spending time doing. And actually like sending follow-up emails, not a very fun thing to do. But now I will 100% do it almost immediately after a call. Writing these Google Sheet formulas, not fun. But now I don't have to like use my brain power to figure out these damn formulas on Google or anything like that. Like
totally,
it's these menial tasks that take time and are sometimes just really annoying to do that you don't have an excuse anymore because AI just does those things so freaking well. Mm-hmm. So instead of thinking about like these revolutionizing use cases, just think about the annoying shit in your day to day that you can start using AI for, and that like replaces it. It does all the thinking for you.
I think that's really good thinking when it comes to product, built-in AI into products as well, because I've seen really bad, sloppy examples. And granted, I haven't explored this to the full extent, so like, you know, don't get mad at me. But like HubSpot seems to be going all in on like AI, where it like helps you write blog posts, helps you write emails and stuff. And again, this is very visible. It's like it's a layer on top that you explicitly have to prompt and interact with. I think there's a lot of HubSpot products that could just use some basic like, you know, like 101 level, like their email tool is really hard to format things in. And on the flip side, you've got like Surfer. I was messing around with their content optimization tool is like what they're known for, but they've got 5 or 6 other features. And I was kind of messing around with the keyword research one. And you can input a target keyword, or you can pull Google Search Console data directly, or you can pull a set of 6 or 7 competitors to build like a keyword kind of cluster. It like clusters it and builds you like a sense of a roadmap. And I just pulled in Google Search Console data from one of our clients, and just to see how the output was, it was pretty damn good, because they've got Search Console data that can also index on what you're already ranking for and what you've already covered, what you should optimize and how you should optimize it. And then net new topics as well as keywords within those topics that you should also be writing. And it's all behind the scenes. You know, it's like, I thought that was such a cool use case of AI.
Dang, I need to look into that.
Saves me time.
That's awesome. Yeah. Going back to just like the mundane stuff, like I have the like empty sheet syndrome or the blinking cursor syndrome or whatever, where if I'm not in the right headspace, it's hard to just start writing. whether it's a follow-up email or a blog post or a newsletter. And I would 10 out of 10 times rather edit than write. And so sometimes I'll just have it create like the shittiest of shitty first drafts, and it's better for me to work with than a blank page. So that's like a quote unquote mundane task, even though a lot of those things I need to write are pretty important. Like follow-up emails, David, are pretty important to what we do, but they're so annoying. And usually when you finish a call, you're like, I just want to be done with this thing and move on to the next thing. So being able to just like write something out and check that box, knowing it's good, obviously, there's a lot of utility in that.
So this is funny because I'm the opposite. And I want to say that this may parlay us into the future of SEO discussion. So follow-up email is a different example, but let's say I want to post something on LinkedIn. When I've tried to use AI to help me generate like a LinkedIn post, I end up spending so much time trying to craft the right prompt and the right prompt chain to get it to produce anything worthwhile, and then an extra amount of time editing it. And then I'm like, I'm a fast and decent writer. Like if I just wrote the damn thing, I'd be, it's so much faster for me. So, so the parlay into Google and the future of like SEO to me is like, I've actually found that everybody's like, oh, is ChatGPT going to be, the Google killer, or is Perplexity going to be the Google killer? Perplexity probably is a more cogent example because it is sort of a retrieval engine and not just like a, predict the next token kind of text engine. But, what I found is, I'll use ChatGPT to sort of explain like I'm five, a concept, or give me like a cursory understanding. But sometimes I can just type 2 words into Google and it'll give me a bunch of shit that's like pretty good, and it'll like let me start the journey. Whereas with ChatGPT, I'll have to think, okay, how do I give it the right context? Oh, no, I've got to tweak this. Like, that's not the right prompt. I have to think more. Okay. Like,
yes.
And I'll end up spending so much time when I can just type in like 1 or 2 words on Google and it'll just give me the results. It's actually way easier to use Google for most things in a information retrieval sense.
Yeah, I think you had written in your most recent field notes too, which, by the way, if folks listening are not subscribed, should go to subscribe to our field notes newsletter. Alex is dropping some knowledge bombs there.
Are you talking about this week, the future of SEO, or the ever evolving death of SEO?
Yeah. Well, I think you referenced some.
That was one of my favorites.
Yeah, you referenced some research, I think, from SparkToro about like where most traffic starts on the internet, and it's like I'm just throwing out a number, like 90% starts on Google still.
It was an extremely high percentage to the point where I think the second biggest one was like 10x lower.
Yeah, and so I mean, we talk about the future of SEO, and it's like. I just met with our new team member, Laura, for coffee today, and we were talking about the future of SEO. And I was like, search is not going away. Humans inherently search for information and truth, like however you define truth, capital T truth. But we're always going to be searching for information. It's just what that looks like is going to change. And maybe the medium by which we search is going to change. But that behavior is going to stick around. It's just, maybe it's not like, maybe the search engine just changes, but search itself does not go away.
So this is good shit. Let's dive into this because this essay was so exciting for me to write because there's very easy ways to refute the fact that SEO is alive today. That data point, the data point that searches and search revenue is growing over time. Like not everybody's on the internet, not everybody's even searching yet. And then there's this study from Dados or something like that Rand also cited, where it's like if you use Google search, your retention is essentially stable over time. You continue using it, if not more, over time. Whereas the retention curve of a ChatGPT user is very spiky in the first day, 2 days, and then it drops off a cliff. So like there's a stickiness problem with some of this too. But to me, that's boring actually. I think the thing that was exciting about writing this essay was I went to first principles and I was like, it's like Google or search engines to me are like analogous to a library or a directory. And as long as there's additional information to write, like in a library, like are all the books written already? Okay, if all the books are written, then fuck it. Let's all stop working on content. Let's stop what we're doing and just, all the info's out there. And then the second part is there's an absolute abundance of information. So it's very valuable to categorize that, to index that, to organize it, and to deliver it to the right people at the right time with the right search queries. And the corollary question to that is, do we believe that that is perfect at this point? Okay, like certainly not. Google, if anything, has gotten a little worse in the past few years. So it's like, if you just look at those two and answer those questions, you're like, clearly there's still search problems to be solved, And maybe like you said, I had this phrase, it's like long live the king, or the king is dead, long live the king, which is essentially saying like this specific king died, but the monarchy lives on. And it's like, that's how I feel about SEO. It's like this specific variation of what we've come to know as SEO, or like whatever playbook and tactical level of it, that may move on, but like the idea is going to live.
Yeah, I think the axis by which we talk a lot about content marketing as well, that isn't addressed very often, is context and timing. Like if we read a lot of the books, I'll just use business books as an example. A lot of the business books nowadays say the same damn thing as books from like 100 years ago. It's just, it uses a different frame of reference, different context. It uses examples from like more modern day, and it uses a different language to communicate the same ideas, but to a different group of people that have different lived experiences. And so, yes, we're probably just regurgitating the same shit as we were 100 years ago, but we're framing it in a different way for a different audience, for a different time. And I think because time continues moving, content's going to continue evolving. And like, we're going to continue recycling these ideas and like communicating them in new ways to new groups of people. And some of these business ideas ended up becoming like just normal, like personal improvement ideas or like productivity ideas that, again, are repackaged up. Same lessons, same takeaways, but repackaged for a different group of people for a different purpose. And like, yeah, there's going to be like infinite number of books, but it's never going to cover all the potential topics for all the different types of audiences available. So I don't think we're going to be out of a job anytime soon.
No. I mean, there's like a level of cynicism on the first point, which is like, if you believe that there are no new ideas, like, I don't know, like that's a question that I often ask in interviews of any candidate we interview, is like, what's the value of content? Like, why do people consume content? Because I want to understand like the first principle of like what they believe the value is. And, people can have different answers, but like, if there's something there, there's something there. So I'm optimistic on that. I think like there's a ton of information in deep subject matter experts' brains that has still been dormant. And if we can unlock that, the world's going to be a better place. Maybe AI can even help us do that. That's like an optimistic take that I have. And then on the other side, there's almost like this utopianism that says, all right, like Google wasn't perfect, but these LLMs will perfectly give you the right answer at the right time. And I just feel there's like, it's like, where is that information going to come from? And like, once you start pulling on that thread, you realize that a lot of the standard best practices in SEO and content, having a crawlable, indexable, good user experience website, and maybe that changes actually like for how LLMs crawl and use your data, having an abundance of content on a given subject and really treating yourself as the expert in that space. And then like maybe the new part is the surround sound, right? Like the digital PR, the product marketing, the contextual cues, where you mentioned, how often you're mentioned in relation to categorical themes and topics and keywords. But like, to me, all of those things parlay into, what are we calling it? AI optimization, LLMO, like chatbot optimization. We don't know the word for it yet, but like, if that is going to be the future interface by which people access information, there's going to be a mechanism by which that information is surfaced. And almost certainly there's going to be some citation mechanism. There already is, obviously, with Perplexity, and GPT gives you like citations. So like, instead of these utopian visions or these cynical takes, like, why aren't you preparing for that?
How does one prepare for that, Alex?
Are you queuing me up for the surround sound, or like, do you want to explain how we've been doing it?
Well, I do think that the question is partly rhetorical because we just don't know. And I think it depends on the channel. Like right now, I don't have a lot of exposure to SGE because I'm still using like Google Workspace. And I don't believe it's been rolled out for Google Workspace. So when I'm on my work computer, I don't have a lot of exposure to it. So I have to go to GPT, Bard, etc. But when I'm on my phone, I'm doing more of like a consumer interaction with Google. It certainly plays a role. So I think there's still some subjectivity to like how folks can prepare depending on who they're targeting and what channels they're using. But I do think it would be good to start with your surround sound SEO theory. It's Alex's.
Totally. Well, we've talked about it on a podcast before. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's definitely like there it's played a multifaceted role now. Like not only is it a matter of getting us to show up in multiple places, but it's informed how we've been showing up in GPT as well. And from where I sit, that was kind of a bonus to that
Yeah.
strategy. One that we didn't know would play out like that. I mean, it does logically make sense because I'm thinking that LLMs use like the frequency by which something is mentioned to understand how popular or how quality it is, which I think there's thoughts there too. But yeah, start with that and see, like, talk about how, I mean, we've had prospects who found us that way, right?
Yeah, totally. Well, the incredibly basic premise is that you want to appear in all places where your potential customer is searching. So basically, surround sound, like sound systems, right? It completely surrounds you, like the word would suggest. So it's like whenever you're in the market for a given solution, you continue to hear the same company or concept. So if you go to a cocktail party and you're like, "Hey, what TV shows are you watching right now?" And like one person says Succession, you're like, okay, cool. That's interesting. I've never heard of that show before. I might check it out. But if like everybody or like 70+% of people say Succession, then like you're pretty solid. You're going to like go back home and like look up Succession. So it's this idea of frequency in the places where your customer is looking. And on Google, it's obvious. So like basically you're searching for best content marketing agencies. By the way, when I'm doing this, Ali, can you pull up Perplexity and search best content marketing agencies? So you can rank your page. Actually, in the past, you used to be able to, like, if you search content marketing agency, you could often rank for your website or a product page, which is becoming less and less common. Nowadays, with G2 and like review sites and affiliate bloggers, there's a lot more diversity, and most of them are showcasing lists, which, you know, if you reverse engineer the logic there, it means that the person who's searching for that is also comparing among a bunch of solutions. So you've got this math where it says, all right, there's 10 SERP links in the current paradigm, and there's a click-through rate associated with each. So if you rank and get mentioned on one, you might have 30% click-through rate, which is whatever traffic. But if you stack that up and you've got second position, then you've got whatever 15% click-through rate, and you can add the math up. But then there's this holistic idea of like brand saturation and brand awareness, where you sort of become like in the consideration set or maybe the obvious solution. And it also matters like how your product marketing defines you within that category, because then you can differentiate based on like your features or your strengths or weaknesses. So you could say, all right, there's the best 10 content marketing agencies. This one's the best for small businesses. This one's the best for high scale. This one's the best for social media distribution. And then you can start to like really build sort of an entity for yourself. And we've done small experiments, which Ali, you're validating right now with some of our own website, and we've written listicles, and we've partnered with other companies to get mentioned on these. And there's a snowball effect where, you know, the more people write listicles, they see you on the top 10, so they include you too. And it's working, right? We're appearing in ChatGPT. We're appearing in Perplexity. I hope so. Please let that be the case, Ali.
Yeah, we're listed as the fourth along other names that we've heard quite often. But what's interesting, so I haven't used Perplexity yet. It's pulling from 5 sources. It lists 5 sources, but we only show up in one of those 5 sources. So it's interesting how it says it pulls from quite a variety of content, but then it's ultimately reflecting the top source, which we're on that list.
So that's the interesting question with all of this stuff, is we actually don't know how these engines are going to weight different sources. And there's some theories with regards to like maybe even classic SEO, you know, like high domain rating or like a lot of links.
Yeah.
So maybe like that stuff still matters. We actually don't know that stuff, and we don't know kind of the token-based contextual clues that's going to make it say like, all right, this is relevant for this specific prompt.
Yeah.
Because you did a generic query, which is like best content marketing agencies. But imagine somebody like strings something along where it's like best content marketing agencies that serve clients in Austin that have 20 plus clients and, you know, cost under 10K a month. Who knows how you're going to get service in that, and like what kind of like additional, you know, magic you've got to do.
I'm typing exactly what you said.
Well, a cool one is too, it's not just like category sort of like discovery keywords, but if you search like what is surround sound SEO, some of these content IP concepts are like, what are data contracts? You start to see, are we the source? And if not, like, why aren't we? And then you can go in and see like which other sources it's pulling from and potentially partner or say like, hey, that's, you know, an idea we coined. Like maybe we should like get cited there.
Yeah.
So it's just like for me, I'm very optimistic, and like I look at problems as like kind of like I salivate and I get excited. I'm like, oh, this is a cool new thing that I can cut my teeth on. Like it's not a solved problem yet.
We did not show up for the Austin query.
Well, we're not under 10K a month.
But what's interesting, well, they did pull in a couple recommendations for folks who do charge over 10K, but they also pulled in some folks who aren't based in Austin. So I don't know exactly what logic it's using. But when I search what is surround sound SEO, your field notes is the second source.
All right.
But we are not listed in the summarized answer. So there's always the question for me, especially, whether it's SGE or GPT, Bard, whatever, Gemini, if people are really leveraging the sources that are mentioned, I think that goes more into like user behavior. If someone wants to double check their sources and really go deeper, or if they're just trying to get like the quick hit answer. And I think that's subjective to what the query is in the first place. If you're looking for like an Excel formula, you're probably not going to double check your work. But I would hope if you're going deeper in terms of like hiring a service that costs 5 figures, maybe someone will do their due diligence. I don't know.
Yeah. That's why I'm a little bit worried, actually. Like when people say like how to and content IP, like this is the future. I'm like, actually, like those may be eaten up a lot easier by AI because people just want quick definitions or like tutorials. And ChatGPT is really good at like giving you a recipe and like the steps to cook it. Whereas like the website kind of sucks and the user experience is bad there. Sometimes you care like where the source came from, like if you're truly like researching and you're a writer or something like that. But I actually think like if we wrote a blog post on like how to do surround sound SEO and somebody could just search that in ChatGPT and just get the summary, like why do they need to come to our site or know that we invented it? And that's the concept of content IP too, right? Like I think it's valuable. I guess like people refer to barbell strategy and like we can kind of like use that as talking points or sales enablement. But there is like a risk because it's like kind of once you launch it, like anybody can take the idea. Like it's not like, like the pain point SEO, right? The grow and convert guys, everybody uses it now. Nobody cites them.
Ranch style. That's the new thing.
Ranch style SEO with Bernard. Yeah.
Not Bernard.
Yeah. People just take a concept and they start slinging it around and nobody thinks like, who was the one who coined this? Because it kind of doesn't matter in this, fast-paced environment we operate within. Speaking of the future of SEO, have you read the ranch style SEO piece from Bernard in ClearScope?
No, I read like a TLDR.
Do you use Perplexity real quick, Allie?
Sure.
Search in Perplexity, what is ranch style SEO? And explain to us real quick.
Bernard's LinkedIn post is the first source.
Interesting.
And then ClearScope's blog, and then Bernard's Twitter is the third source. Based on the search results, ranch style SEO refers to a content strategy approach that prioritizes the depth, quality, and relevance of content across a wide range of topics rather than just optimizing for specific keywords and backlinks. The key points about ranch style SEO are: it is a shift in SEO away from just keywords and backlinks toward creating genuinely helpful, unique, and insightful content. Never heard that before. The focus is on building topical authority by thoroughly and widely covering relevant topics rather than just optimizing individual pages.
It's doing a terrible job summarizing that. It's so generic.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, so this is LLMs have their limitations, is what we're trying to illustrate, maybe inadvertently. But yeah, so the concept is topical authority. It's basically pitting it against the old skyscraper ultimate guide methodology and saying like, hey, like actually that's really ripe for disruption with these LLMs. You can summarize a lot of those answers. Look at the people also ask, look at the topic clusters, look at all the variants of keywords, and then dive really deeply and use subject matter expertise. There's obviously words like information gain thrown around, but really the idea is to like splinter off, be more specific. There were a couple takes that I didn't necessarily agree with, which is like technical SEO being a commodity. I've seen too many broken websites to believe that, and backlinks mattering less. Again, these LLMs still need to, rank using some signals, and like Forbes is still ranking for all this crazy shit. So I still think like just proof is in the pudding on that one. But the overall concept, I actually think, I don't know if it's like disruptive or anything insane to us, but like I think it is the right way to think about SEO in the future.
Yeah, I went through to Bernard's original post, and he defines it as ranch style SEO or the disaggregation of SEO content to build topical authority, sparking lots of engagement, etc. And then at the end, he says, the main takeaway I want to impart with ranch style SEO, it's not about just slicing your content into smaller pieces that target longer tail keywords. It's to target distinct perspectives in the search journey, which is interesting.
I'm actually, I don't disagree with that, but I am a little skeptical about that. I just don't think it's been proven out in any way to me. Like, I don't think we've seen any experiments or like any real proof that like, so information gain is like a very specific technical term that Google used in a patent. And when we say it, we kind of mean like novel information. And I think that is valuable to the reader to the extent that it's actually interesting and not just like hot takes for hot takes sake. But I don't necessarily know that like creating net new perspectives drives more success, at least now. I don't know.
Yeah.
It feels like one of those like moral, like, you know, it's like hard to argue against. It's like, yeah, like provide new angles. And it's like, who's going to say no to that? Is it true? I don't know.
Yeah. I guess two things. I actually view this ranch style SEO that he calls it. I'm not a big fan of the name, but I guess it's the opposite of skyscraper. I feel like it's an evolution of the pillar cluster model that I think HubSpot popularized. Like,
yeah.
And the hub and spoke one before HubSpot popularized it.
Yeah. Whatever you want to call it. Like, it's just people were always asking like, oh, should this be a cluster page or a pillar page? And I'm like, good God, I hate that question so much. Like, it just did away with that question. It's just like, just have a cluster of content about this topic and very like hitting it at different angles and different like specific questions. Who gives a fuck? What's the pillar page? Like link all the irrelevant pages. Like, people got so stuck on the semantics of all of that.
Yeah.
And now it's just like, yeah, write about it very like specifically and cover the topic like broadly and deeply. And then I actually like the idea on perspective, not from a search perspective, but from a reader perspective, where like I was evaluating us using deal.com or remote.com. I read all this content about deal versus remote. Everything just said the same goddamn thing. It just rehashed what was on their website in like generic terms. The writer clearly didn't even use either product. I had to go to Reddit to look for that information. And I was like, if there was one article that was like objective, used both platforms, presented like unique information about their opinions on both platforms,
yeah,
I would have trusted that a ton more.
Totally.
Which I see like in other searches I've done, but like that was one of those cases where I'm like, I want a unique perspective, not some generic perspective on these things. Like, and this has been an issue for years.
But don't you think there's still a discrepancy between what you want and what Google's delivering?
Yeah. That's why I think I don't necessarily agree.
But then there's the ranking for the keyword and then like presenting your
consumption,
unique
the conversion. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I don't think it's ranch style SEO. I think it's ranch style content strategy, because to me, like not all of these components of hit. Okay. So I'm looking at a diagram he has part of his LinkedIn post, and there's like insights, experience, unique POV, why not, how it works, what to, how to, top or best, like all these different buckets of like types of content or like different components of the ranch that you write pieces on. Not all of those will be discoverable or distributable on search. You know, maybe there's not search behavior, there's not keyword volume, and ultimately Google will always surface more like informational queries unless it's something that's really specific. Like David, even trying to search for like original thought or like legit reviews. I personally just go straight to Quora or Reddit. So in my thought, like if you're going to
Quora, you go to Quora?
Sometimes.
Wow.
For like discussion around topics, or like if it's more of like a conversation versus just like a review of something, like how do you use this, or like what's your experience with this? Sometimes there's decent conversation. Obviously it needs to be newer.
All right. Yeah, no, you're like the first person I've ever heard say that.
Really?
Yeah, Quora's like garbage.
There's some gems in
you
there.
can just like it looks, I don't know whether it's AI or not, but it all feels like AI answers to me. Like it's like the worst shit.
Yeah.
I've been seeing Reddit and Quora at like position 3 or 4.
Well, yeah, that's like the last year or two of Google helpful content updates. Everybody wants Reddit and Quora. Apparently, feels like a safe bet to me, but that's a totally different kind of conspiracy theory. But yeah, no, it's just because they're being surfaced more. I think I'm just giving you shit because I just think Quora is like, like the worst.
What's interesting is the first comment under this post, someone said, I think for this reason, we'll also see less content from websites and more content from social media. Because sometimes that, like, at least the perspectives and the experience with products or with different things, like, it needs to come from the source. And I just don't think that, like David said, Deal would publish like an original review page, or I don't know. I don't know how like websites or product sites solve for that. Sometimes it's just best to go right to the source from like actual individuals, or communities even. Like I'm sure Slack, Dark Social, they'll be part of this. Like making sure you pop up in all kinds of channels and not just create all this type of content for search. I think that's where I think people will feel like it's not working, because they're like, oh, all these articles I'm creating, they can't find on Google. I'm like, I don't know if people use Google for all these different parts of the search journey.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a very hard question to answer without specifics. I do I want to touch. Maybe this is too deep for this podcast episode, but I cited a couple of sources in that that essay this week on Field Notes about Google essentially being broken. Like we talked about it's good enough, right? It was basically like, oh, it's good enough for Google. It's like Forbes is fine for best creatine powders, whatever. There was also the DOJ stuff where it was like they kind of admitted that they don't know how to read documents, and they just use click data and user experience and, hypothetically like domain rating as well. And there was this deep dive on like the man who killed Google search. I don't know if you've read this yet, but it's fascinating. Google's PR team put out a statement. There's just, like if you look at like Lily Ray's Twitter, granted, like a lot of these websites that are getting crushed were kind of bad, but a lot of them weren't, and like who's to say that some affiliate blogger who does a niche site is like any worse than Forbes, who has like the lowest integrity of any publisher I've ever seen. So it's like there's clearly like a signal and noise problem with Google. So when you guys say perspectives and social rank and like all of these things are going to be more common, and granted, Ali, your point is taken on kind of off SEO, like those that'll be found elsewhere. But I just wonder how real that is now at this moment in time, given that Google seems not to be able to even read documents very well. Like it just seems like they're using sort of like secondary signals and not necessarily like words on page to say this has a novel perspective that seems to be first person and experiential in nature. And this is just me being a little bit more like maybe cynical and skeptical. I would love for that to be the case, but in so many SERPs, it's not.
No, I mean, I haven't really explored the perspectives part of the new Google rollout. Have you all?
No, I didn't even know that rolled out.
See, that's what's tough is like most of the time at my computer, I'm using the workspace and it just isn't, Google Workspace doesn't have all those things rolled out. But if you're on like your personal Google or like an individual Google account, there's this perspectives. I think it's one of the tabs. Like there's the news, images, videos, etc. It's one of those tabs. And I've seen most of those results are TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Reddit, Quora. So I think what's happening, from my limited insight into this, is Google's continuing to index on like other signals, mostly social media probably has original thought, original perspective. Because I don't think I've ever seen like a business website on that list, even if the piece is written as like an op-ed.
This is on perspective specifically.
Yeah, even if the title is more geared toward like our review with blank, or like my experience with X, like I haven't seen any like business sites on there, but I'm one person, so I don't know. I feel like Google's still using the same kind of signals you said, like secondary signals, like okay, most TikTok posts must be original perspective, therefore we're going to bucket it here. But as for that, like I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that perspective, I just wonder how many people are even using that perspectives tab. It just sometimes seems to me like if you build a bunch of links and you have an established brand, it's kind of like Google's like hand wavy advice where it's like, want to rank in Google? Build a brand. And you're like, well, fucking how do I build a brand? Like, this is a chicken and egg problem. Yeah. Publish content that we can use to feed our LLMs. Like, it's like, okay. Oh, information gain. You want novel information, but you don't want to rank my site and give me any traffic or credit for it. Very cool. I do think that like, they have to figure this out because like Ethan Hayes and I had talked about in our podcast, Moz, it's going to be a snake eating its own tail. Like Google needs publishers and Google needs to like have sort of user sentiment in place and like PR in place. Like it's not endlessly sustainable to like what I think is like they're doing is they've got like this massive problem. Read the articles, like there's a whole bunch of speculation, but they've got this massive problem of filtering signal and noise, and they don't have a really good way to do it. So they're using the system that basically is geared towards safety and not accuracy. So they're optimizing for fewer false positives, even if there's a bunch of false negatives. So instead of having, say, like really shitty spam links rank, given like a different weighting system, they're like, you know what's safe? Forbes. People are going to like Reddit. People know what Reddit is. People know what Forbes is. So this user who's not an SEO, who's not a marketer, who doesn't know behind the curtain, they're probably satisfied. They're probably like, yeah, this is fine. Meanwhile, we're like, what is going on? Well, to wrap up, despite like bringing up a couple cynical takes and conspiratorial takes, I'm pretty optimistic. And I feel like one theme that we always hit on is like us three and our company in general is very interested in problem solving. So it's like when a lot of other people maybe throw their hands up or go down the cynical rabbit hole, like I'm like, this is actually a very, very exciting time to be working in search. And whether that's Google, whether that's GPT, whatever that is, I think it's exciting. And just to like cap off and give credit where credit's due, Maiva summarized like the results or the conversation of this table. So I'll just list a couple of them off, which we've mostly hit, but I just want to like cap it off here. So SEO is not only going to be for Google due to changing behaviors in search. True SEO will start to optimize for appearing in LLMs. In order to do that, you need to do the surround sound SEO strategy, basically be mentioned in all the top results and all the influential places. Brand mentions in relation to your main product topic are going to be increasingly important as contextual links. Even if there's no link, the LLMs will start to be able to contextualize this. Your SEO content can't be, quote, just for SEO. Consider this your brand awareness content that's going to be building your reputation digitally everywhere that isn't social media. AI is awesome and we love it. It helps us become more creative and think faster. It's not just for copying, pasting text and content. That's not what it's meant to be used for. We love ranch style SEO. Just like you have a writer database, it might be time to start building an SME/creator/influencer database that you can work with on a regular basis. And we may be going back to the old blogging style, bringing up personal experiences, anecdotes, and stories over generic how-tos, and author bylines being the brand team or the company team. That's a pretty good summary of, we believe all that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Good stuff.